Hello. Well, welcome to both of
Morning.
you. We are thrilled to have you both here to help us kick off this wonderful program today. And of course, we are starting with a topic that I think continues to be top of mind for many of us, maybe all of us, which is artificial intelligence and the impact that it is having on travel shopping and buying, and ultimately the bottom line for companies such as Booking.com and Flight Centre Travel Group. And I think it's going to be interesting over the next 20, 25 minutes to hear some of the commonalities and also some of the differences about what you have to say about AI for leisure travel and AI for corporate travel. So let's get started, Rob, maybe with you. I think it was last August that we first heard about Booking.com's AI trip planner. We haven't heard a whole lot of updates since then, but I'm hoping maybe you can bring us up to date on what's happening, what you're seeing as far as usage and conversion rates.
Sure. We don't really share conversion rates from it, but
Okay.
what I would say, we started in the U.S. We've launched it in UK, New Zealand, a few other countries. So we're still very much in a test and learn mode with it. So what I would say is we've certainly learned that it does not go backwards for conversion. And we find that customers do rate the conversations high. And so I think we've spent a lot of time on what we call intent optimization. So the better we understand the actual intent of the customer, the better we can almost get them straight to what they're really looking for in terms of their desire to travel. So for us, we're not trying to push out things really quickly and learn in a way that becomes a burden on the customer. So our approach is a little slower maybe to get things out, but behind the scenes we're doing a lot of things that sort of optimize the actual understanding of the intent of the customer. And then secondly, I would say we see such potential for this that we are spending a lot of time and resources on the underlying platform and capabilities to make sure that we're doing a very good job around moderation, toxicity, PII protection, so data protection, all of those things. Those underpinnings we feel are so core to being able to just turn the jets on for AI in general for Booking.
Do you have plans to expand it beyond the U.S.?
Indeed, yes. I have no dates for it.
Okay, all right, fair enough. And just one other question about that. Of course, we've heard about Expedia's Romy. Trip.com group has Trip Genie. Booking is simply calling it an AI trip planner. And I just wondered, is that intentional to not kind of position it as a separate almost tool and it's more embedded in what you're doing? Or?
Yeah, I'll go back to why I said this, the platform side of this, there is more to come. So trip planning is just one aspect of where we know we'll be leveraging AI. So certainly that was our first opportunity. If you recall, we didn't think that plug-in experience was a rich enough experience, so we sort of developed the AI trip planner, and we focused on that as a deliverable with the carousel, so you could book right in the conversation itself. But we don't think it's limited to just planning a trip, for sure.
Okay, but you're not going to tell us right now exactly
Not today.
Okay, all right. So Adrian, back in 2014, you co-founded SAM, really one of the first chatbot travel assistants that we heard about. I have to ask, do you remind people regularly that you were doing AI long before AI was cool?
It is actually really funny because we now, people are experiencing what we have been wanting to build for the past 10 years. Technology was not there, was the first wave of chatbots. Facebook was introducing their tools. And we had all these ideas. We actually found it in Barcelona. We actually presented in Phocuswright 2017. So there were quite a few amazing years, but also the technology did not let us. We were a small startup, 15 employees, so you couldn't build what we had in mind. And now, actually, this is everyone is kind of feeling the tools are there, and it's becoming more and more a reality. We do actually have plans to make SAM. So SAM has been a success for us story, digital travel assistant, and it was helping you, but it was not that bi-directional. It was not able to completely understand your intent, your request, and give you back what you needed. It was more one-directional, suggesting tips in the right moment, which was quite helpful, but didn't have that conversational part.
Right.
Now we're working on that, not forgetting that the users still have a lot of questions, and they still need to have this feeling of communication, have someone available all the time.
Yeah, and so just for some context for those that may not know it, so Flight Centre bought SAM in 2019, and then you became part of the Flight Centre family. And now in December, you were named head of AI for corporate for Flight Center Travel Group.
Correct.
So help us understand, a little bit about what you're doing in that role, and what do you see as the best use cases for generative AI in corporate travel?
Yeah, so the concept was like, I think pretty much everyone here in the room, like we need to define the AI strategy. We're talking with some of our partners, technology partners. It was actually Microsoft and their AI team that told us, look, what we're seeing on companies working better is like you establish a team, dedicated team for kind of embracing AI. So these are, we are, and I'm including myself, the one that, we finish work and we go to watch the latest keynote. I was watching Apple keynote yesterday to see the updates.
Yeah.
And we act as ambassadors, like we try to infuse this AI culture inside the group while we keep building new things. We are not the only team building AI tools inside the company, we're just empowering everyone. We're starting with some internal productivity tools, like most corporations. There's less risk and a big return of investment, but at the same time, because we already have the persona of Sam, we're adding a lot of new features there, like to also keep the user, the end user, the traveler with some AI capabilities.
Could I
Yeah.
comment? Something interesting in booking, we started mostly on the product-facing, the customer, the traveler-facing side of things, and we were a little slower on the internal productivity side. Partially, I think, from a pure risk perspective in the early days, we weren't sure that we fully understood the risk associated with any internal data and such. But what we have found over time is that the closer you put the problem into the hands of people who feel the problem and democratize access to Gen AI, the more the ideas just start to percolate. So same thing. That's why I'm so interested in and invested in the platform capability to really let anybody in any group make use of this. And so I think what we've started to now focus more is even just training people how to think about where Gen AI could be helpful in their space. Because just if you live in a world where you maybe have a daily throughput objective, you're not thinking optimization, you're thinking hit your numbers. And so it's a mind shift that you have to really incentivize and encourage.
Yeah. So there's a lot of internal work you've had to do then to make this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We actually run some workshop where we meet different teams, maybe software engineers, maybe marketing, and we are like, okay, these are the possibilities. Tell us about your day-to-day, your problems, the low-value tasks, and people end up so happy because at the beginning they're like, I thought you were coming here to kind of kill my job, like to replace me with AI,
Right.
and I live with AI, with actually this is going to make my day-to-day much better because I'm not going to waste 2 hours doing this really low-value things I don't enjoy, and I can focus on doing the better part of it.
It is that I have to give credit to Microsoft. Copilot is the perfect name because it really is. That's where we find Gen AI is it's with you versus replacing you.
Yes, 100%.
So let me also ask, I heard Glenn Fogel recently talking about how the trip planner is solving the problem of too many choices for the consumer. And that's something we hear quite a bit about. So it's through that conversational chat, you're able to narrow down some of the options that are then presented to the traveler. I know that on a regular Booking.com search, you acknowledge openly that an accommodations ranking, for example, is partly based on the commission that the accommodation is paying to Booking.com. Does that also factor into the way you are presenting results in the trip planner? Because it's a much more limited selection of choices.
Yeah, you can there's a high level of reusability here. So just like you, we're longtime machine learning practitioners, and our ranking and recommendation engines are finely tuned to optimize to find that match. So the co-creation of value between a partner and a traveler. There's all sorts of logic that goes into that. Separately, we're having a conversation in a chat conversation, and we're really, you can do things that you cannot do in a traditional user experience. Filter, filter, filter. This lets you get much more specific of what someone is looking for. Once we have that truly understood, then ironically, we actually use Gen AI to generate the software that would go and be invoked to our recommendation engine. So we use the exact same recommendation engine, but we've used the conversational bit and then Gen AI to produce the same code that we would produce if someone were checking filters on the website and then submit it to the recommendation. So that part does not change.
Okay.
We now just have a much more finely tuned understanding of the intent of the customer. The example I use is if you think about it, if you wanted to say, I want to go to Las Vegas for a romantic getaway, but make it cheesy. There's no cheesy filter.
Right.
But if you're being cheesy, maybe it's a heart-shaped bed, maybe it's staying at the Elvis Chapel.
Right.
Those things are now you have that understanding, and that can be fed into the recommendation engine.
Okay. And we are of the belief that that is what consumers want then, is to have the more personalized, limited choices.
Indeed, and that's what these large language models do very well, going from something very generic and then beginning to really understand the intent. They're very good at that.
And Adrian, one of the questions that comes to mind when I think about your work is how are you managing some of the challenges related specifically to kind of the corporate travel space? I know when we talked earlier, you said you hear a little bit of fear from some of the companies that you work with, and there's data privacy issues.
There's obviously so many questions. There's no a day goes by without getting some requests from either an existing customer or prospect asking, okay, what's your AI policy, how you're using our data? And that is normal, and it's a fair concern that they have. So you need to, as part of this AI group, you need to establish your AI strategy. You need to be, good friends with your the lawyers on your company, buy a few beers so they help you with all these requests. And at the end, it's kind of be transparent. Honestly, we have a lot of data from the customer. We don't need all your personal data. We're not training. We are not using that because also that may cause leakage of information. We don't need that. We just need the interaction. We need the if I offer you 10 flights, which two you picked, things that we have been doing in the past. Every company with machine learning has been similar. We're not doing something different, but people need to understand. And also because at the end we are B2B2C, so we have the end traveler. That's the one that is going to be exposed to SAM and other AI tools. They're a bit concerned about hallucination, and Rob mentioned very well, you need to put a lot of safety measures risk, you need to make sure that the bot is not going to start responding in a bad way, insulting the user or, going in a direction. So you start building all this safety and check control, all this structure that pretty much, this architecture allows you that anything that you build, start reusing this, and, you are in a much safer space, let's put it that way.
Okay. And so ultimately, I would love to hear you both speak to how are you measuring success? Do you have specific KPIs? Are you looking for an impact potentially on the bottom line? How are you determining success and what's worth continuing or maybe what you need to pull back from?
So on the AI trip planner, right now, like I said, we're learning. So we're not holding the teams to hey, you must hit this number, you must do that. We're searching for the thing that customers enjoy. And so for us, success is, the customer does rate the quality of the conversation. They felt like they got what they were looking for. Right now, we're still just trying to optimize that and make that the richest experience. It's a long game for that. There are other areas on the internal productivity side, for example, where I do have much more specific KPIs or metrics around. So code generation is one that lots of people are using, obviously, in the software development world. And I'm going after, literally the number of engineering hours saved through that. So there are some cases where you can do that very explicitly. But when it comes to customer experiences and what we can do for our partners and our travelers, we're more in a learning mode than trying to hold ourselves and constrain ourselves to bottom line contribution.
Yeah, I think I heard Sharuta say earlier, we tend to overestimate in the short term and underestimate the long-term value. And it sounds like you're trying to focus on that longer-term value. So Adrian, how about you? What are you measuring as far as success?
Yeah, quite similar with Rob, actually. Internal tools are a bit easier to measure because, we kind of link to a return of investment, hours saved. Because we're starting to give these AI tools to different teams, and we can actually measure by doing this task with AI, you're saving, 20 minutes per day, and that's an easy number to keep track on savings. We do want, and this is also part of the strategy, we don't want this AI center of excellence that I lead to be like a cost center, just to, you throw money at it and we'll see if something sticks. We do, especially for all this productivity, we want it to be linked to actual productivity, cost, and hours saved, so people can focus on other things. But at the same time, we're doing a lot of research, things that we're not yet sure. We're working with AI agents, exploring on the search option. There's so many things that you're not sure and how to even start measuring the return of investment, but it's going to hopefully improve the the usability of the platform, the user experience. So that's more a long-term goal.
Yeah, you touched on something there around cost. That's why I'm so focused on, I think we're looking for the things that are richer for our customers, but also how to manage this well. And cost is one of them versus performance versus quality. Those are always things that you're juggling. But in this space right now, we've certainly seen multiple iterations already of starting with OpenAI, then finding that an open source model outperforms from quality and cost, and then OpenAI launches a new model that shifts that again. And so those are core capabilities you have to be able to do model comparison to understand, well, when is it time to start fine-tuning and distilling versus the prompt engineering that you have to do. So there's all these things that you have to, and I just think we are going to have several more years of everybody leapfrogging each other. So right now we see a pattern of maybe OpenAI launches something, then open source, and then you're just back and forth. And I think that's going to continue to exist for a while. I don't think it's limited to just OpenAI either.
I'm curious for both of you, is it exhausting or is it exhilarating? I mean, it's because that's one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is how you keep up with all of this. It's like a fire hose of updates.
I'm a techie. I love this. I really like it. It's not exhausting. Like, there's a lot of news. There's a lot of keynotes. But at the same time, we are living now in a moment that I'm watching, like a couple of weeks ago, like keynote from OpenAI. 10 minutes later, I'm using their new model. And you change, because as Rob said, because you have built everything around it, changing actually the foundational model that you use is not that complex. You still need to test everything, make sure that it complex. So, okay, today we're testing the new model from OpenAI, but tomorrow, okay, Meta announced the new Llama thing. Okay, fine. And if tomorrow OpenAI announced GPT-5, that's great for us. It's not like, oh, damn, what am I going to do now? I need to throw everything and start again from the scratch. It's quite the opposite. It's like, okay, my system now is better. It's either faster, smarter, or it's cheaper if I stay on the previous version. So it's really exciting. But yeah, you need to spend a lot of hours just keeping up with what everything is going.
Yeah. Would you say exciting or exhausting?
Similarly, I feel like I was born at the right time in terms of, I was pre-internet, it was pre-iPhone, and now this. These feel like three really big step functions of what's possible. It has that same feeling of just, boy, we're just getting started here. And I think it's actually easier to see with this one the upcoming magnitude than it was for the other two.
Yeah, very interesting. So I think I heard, Adrian, you mention agents. Yeah. So I would love to talk a bit, because that does feel like one of the big things that we need to all be thinking about right now are the AI agents. We've had the updates from OpenAI about their multimodal agent and Google. And how are you thinking about AI agents, both of you, for your business, and what are you doing to prepare?
Without getting too technical, and I would love to get technical. Someone wants to catch me later for a coffee, can spend hours talking about this. But for me, the difference, like most of us, we have been using things like ChatGPT. You introduce a prompt and you get a response, and that's already quite useful. But on agents, you give a task, like I want you to do this. You give a set of tools. The tools may be, cancel a reservation, add an ancillary product. You give a set of tools that you have built around, and then you give some instruction, like you need to have a train of thought, reasoning. Ask yourself questions. So the AI, instead of responding directly to you, is going to respond itself. Okay, I have this task. How do I break it down? Which tools do I call? Okay, I'm going to call this tool and get this response. With this information, I'm going to do that. And you actually, it's quite amazing. Like you sit there almost with your popcorn, watching the AI reasoning itself, taking action. And they're able to break down really complex tool into, what you want. It's not just generate some text on some song, which is nice. This is really valuable. And this is what I think in the next year. I mean, we just saw yesterday Apple making Siri a bit more agent-like, collaborating with other tools. And I do envision a future where it's not just one agent. There are different agents collaborating together, reaching a consensus. Okay, you're an expert on travel, or you're an expert, like we have our AI, and Rob has the booking AI, and they can actually collaborate to manage reservation. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's continuity of thought. That is what has always been frustrating with chatbots or IVR phone systems, is how many times have you been asked to repeat the same thing? Every time you can tell you just got handed from one system to another and you're starting over. And maybe there was some type of handoff. But I think what we're seeing is, initially it was, wow, ChatGPT, here's a big LLM that does something that you couldn't do before. but the surrounding ecosystem to pull in, recall these models were trained years ago, and so they don't have current information. They're trained on old data, so you have to augment that with real data. So the ability to pull in data in real time to augment what you've learned through that whole ecosystem is what's going to make the agents much more powerful.
So there's clearly a trust issue then if you have agents talking to agents, right? So I would assume that kind of the user profile or some of that information becomes even more valuable then, and establishing some of that trust. How are you thinking about profiles and kind of a data strategy, not just an AI strategy?
I think not only profiles, but I think data, and we were talking about this before, like there's ongoing data war, like all the foundational model, everyone's trying to read pretty much everything that has been ever written. And I was reading an estimation last week that they say that we will run out of original content for this large language model by 2027. That's just 3 years from now.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen, what I feel will happen, that then large companies like ours, we do have our own data. So that's the extra thing. Like, how do you compare with a competitor using the same base model? If we both use GPT-4, we have the same model. So it's like, what extra information, what you have been capturing in the past? Obviously, you need to be really careful what we mentioned before. You need to be transparent with your customer. What information are you using? How you're using this data to empower your model, to fine-tune, as they call it, without actually taking more risk. But I think this is where the next year will take us. Like, we will be kind of like researching in our own data to see what is actually more valuable.
Yeah, and I think similarly, if you think of just traditional e-commerce sites, order history is something that can be helpful to understand the intent of a customer. So are the conversations you've had with them. So now you have to protect those conversations, but those conversations are private to an individual, much like a profile. So we don't send personally identifiable information off to other LLMs. We just don't do that. We don't share data with third parties. That's the thing we've never done. But those conversations are actually valuable for the customer if we treat them as part of the profile. So in a conversation, we expire those conversations, so they don't live for forever. We don't hand them off in other exchanges, and that's just not something we would do. We think there's value in the history of the conversations to help with recommendations in the future.
But then help me understand. So could we have a time when AI agents are everywhere, and I have my AI agent, and it's communicating with Booking.com through an AI agent, and it's managing the booking for myself, for me, and it's making the payment and all of that. And then maybe when I'm doing my next business trip, it's doing it through one of your corporate entities, all through the agent ecosystem. Yes.
That time is near.
Yeah.
Yes. And so nothing changes though in terms of fundamentally. From a traceability, auditability of understanding, if your system did something, you have to know what it did.
Right.
And that's why, as you launch these things, you put all of these guardrails and these core capabilities in place to make sure that you don't make some drastic mistake. But the accountability to make sure that if your system takes an action, you know why it did it, on behalf of whom, and you have full traceability to it is still relevant.
Yeah.
And I feel you will still have control of your data. Like, same way that you download an app today and you sign in with your Google account or Apple, like, you should know what data you're sharing. There's some disclaimer. I feel, and Apple started yesterday introducing a bit this concept, like you're connecting Siri with another tool, and this is the data that they need to serve you.
Right.
So if you connect this with, with Uber, they will need your name because the driver needs to know, to pick you up. But like, you will still have some control when you're switching, like the same way that you switch apps today.
Just as an aside, I'm doing a session tomorrow on digital identity, and I think that's intimately involved with what we're getting into right here. But we're getting close on our time, so before we wrap up, I would just love to hear from both of you. What are maybe one or two of your priorities for the coming year, for the next 12 months? Rob, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mentioned clearly platformatization, if that's a word, is a big focus for me. We'll continue to test and learn for our partners and our travelers. We initially started on the traveler side. We think there's opportunity in the partner space as well. And then really, I want to really focus on the training and the understanding within the entirety of the Booking internal environment and unleash that internally.
Okay. Adrian?
For us, obviously we're continuing how, with some of these internal tools, which they're showing a lot of success, and with the whole SAM assistant. But in general, it's more like as a philosophy. I think we have been talking about AI now for a couple of years. I want this, next year, next Phocuswright in Barcelona, that people start, understanding that this is just not a marketing fad. This is the real thing. They're actually production, that we have a few use case in production. People are getting real value out of it. That's my goal. How we convince people, and the best way is you put it out the market and people start using, you get good NPS, good feedback, and that's priority.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have you back next year. Maybe
Thank you. I
we'll
would
talk
love
about what the updates are. So, Rob Francis, Adrian Lopez, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.